Alex Santos sat in the back row of Dr. Margaret Whitfield's advanced mathematics class, trying to make himself invisible. But when he raised his hand to answer a calculus question that had stumped the entire class, Dr. Whitfield's response would change everything. "Santos, you don't belong here. This school isn't for people like you." What she didn't know was that in exactly 12 years, she'd be begging that same scholarship kid for a job. Welcome to Untold Legends, where we uncover the extraordinary stories of ordinary people who refused to accept the limitations others placed on them. Today's story will remind you that sometimes the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating someone who has nothing left to lose. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Westfield Academy, Connecticut's most prestigious private school. Behind its ivy-covered walls, the children of senators, CEOs, and old money families received the kind of education that virtually guaranteed admission to Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. Alex Santos didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. At 16, Alex was thin for his age, with worn sneakers that had been resoled twice and a backpack held together with duct tape. While his classmates arrived in BMW convertibles and Range Rovers, Alex took 2 buses from his family's cramped apartment in Bridgeport, leaving home at 5:30 a.m. every morning to make the 8 a.m. bell. His mother, Carmen Santos, worked double shifts at the textile factory to help pay for the small portion of tuition that Alex's academic scholarship didn't cover. His father, Miguel, worked construction when his back allowed it, which was less and less these days. They'd sacrificed everything for Alex's education, believing that Westfield Academy was their son's ticket to a better life. Dr. Margaret Whitfield represented everything Alex's family wasn't. At 45, she was the daughter of a federal judge and the wife of a successful investment banker. Her family had been donating to Westfield Academy for 3 generations, and she taught advanced mathematics with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. Today, we'll be exploring multivariable calculus, Dr. Whitfield announced to her class of 28 students, most of whom were checking their phones under their desks. I expect you've all completed the assignments from chapters 12 and 13. Alex had not only completed the assignments, he'd worked ahead through chapter 15. Mathematics was his sanctuary, the one place where his family's financial situation didn't matter. Numbers didn't care about your zip code or the brand of your clothes. They just followed logical rules, and Alex had always been exceptional at understanding those rules. But being good at math wasn't enough at Westfield Academy. Success here required something Alex would never possess: the easy confidence that came from generational wealth and social connections. "Mr. Hartwell," Dr. Whitfield called on Trevor Hartwell, whose father owned half of downtown Hartford. "Can you solve the differential equation on the board?" Trevor glanced up from his phone, squinted at the blackboard, and shrugged. "I didn't really get to the homework last night. Had dinner at the country club with my dad and Senator Morrison." Dr. Whitfield smiled indulgently. "Of course. Networking is just as important as academics. Perhaps someone else can help us." Several students made half-hearted attempts, but it was clear that most of them had either skipped the reading or simply didn't understand the concepts. Alex watched from the back row, his hand gradually rising as the silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Dr. Whitfield noticed him. "Yes, Santos. The differential equation is solvable using separation of variables," Alex said quietly. "If you rearrange the terms and integrate both sides, you get y equals negative cosine of x plus c, where c is the constant of integration." The answer was correct, and everyone in the room knew it. But instead of acknowledging Alex's understanding, Dr. Whitfield's expression hardened. Santos, just because you can memorize formulas doesn't mean you understand mathematical theory, she said coldly. Real mathematical thinking requires intuition that can't be taught. Alex felt heat rise in his cheeks. I wasn't memorizing. I worked through the logic step by step. Did you? Dr. Whitfield's voice carried an edge that made several students look up from their phones. Because in my experience, students from your background tend to focus on getting the right answer rather than understanding the underlying principles. The classroom fell silent. Students who had been texting or doodling suddenly found the conversation fascinating. Everyone understood what your background meant. I do understand the principles, Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can explain the derivation if you want. Dr. Whitfield set down her chalk and fixed Alex with a stare that could have frozen water. Santos, let me be very clear about something. You may have tested well enough to earn a scholarship to this institution, but that doesn't mean you belong here. This school isn't for people like you. The words hit Alex like physical blows. Around him, his classmates exchanged glances, some looking uncomfortable, others barely suppressing smirks. People like me? Alex asked. People who think education is about finding the right answers instead of asking the right questions. People who see learning as a transaction rather than a transformation. People who... She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. People who would probably be more comfortable in a different kind of educational environment. Trevor Hartwell snickered. Maybe he should try community college. That's enough, Mr. Hartwell, Dr. Whitfield said, but her tone suggested she didn't really mean it. Santos, perhaps you should consider whether your goals align with what Westfield Academy offers. Some students thrive here, and others, well, others might find more success in practical fields. Maybe you should consider a trade school where your particular skills would be more appreciated. Alex stared at his desk, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He'd given the correct answer to a difficult question, and somehow that had been turned into evidence that he didn't belong. Can anyone else attempt the next problem? Dr. Whitfield continued, as if the previous exchange had never happened. For the remaining 30 minutes of class, Alex sat in stunned silence. When the bell rang, he gathered his worn textbooks and headed for the door, but Dr. Whitfield's voice stopped him. Santos, a word. Alex waited until the classroom emptied, then approached her desk. I want you to understand that what happened today wasn't personal, Dr. Whitfield said, not looking up from her papers. But you need to recognize reality. Westfield Academy prepares students for leadership positions in society. Our graduates become senators, CEOs, federal judges. They don't become, well, whatever it is your family does. My mother works in a factory, Alex said quietly. My father builds houses. Exactly my point. Honest work, I'm sure, but not the kind of careers our curriculum is designed to foster. You're clearly intelligent, Santos, but intelligence isn't enough. Success in the real world requires connections, cultural understanding, and frankly, resources that your family simply doesn't possess. Alex felt something breaking inside his chest. So I should just give up? I'm suggesting you should be realistic about your prospects. Community college, perhaps followed by a practical degree in computer programming or engineering technology. Something useful, but appropriate to your circumstances. Dr. Whitfield finally looked up, and Alex saw something in her eyes that was almost pity. Santos, I've been teaching here for 15 years. I've seen dozens of scholarship students come through these doors, all convinced they were going to change the world. Do you know where they are now? Managing regional sales territories, teaching high school, working as mid-level engineers. Perfectly respectable careers, but not the kind of success that Westfield Academy represents. She leaned back in her chair. You're a smart boy, but you're also a realist, aren't you? Your family has sacrificed a great deal to give you this opportunity, but perhaps their money would be better spent on something more attainable. Alex nodded numbly and headed for the door. Santos? Dr. Whitfield called out one last time. For what it's worth, I do hope you find success. Just somewhere more appropriate to your station in life. 3 weeks later, Alex Santos walked out of Westfield Academy for the last time. The final straw hadn't been another humiliation in Dr. Whitfield's class, though those had continued with depressing regularity. It hadn't been the snide comments from classmates, or the way teachers seemed to look right through him during discussions. The breaking point had come during a college counseling session. Alex, Mrs. Patterson, the college advisor, had said with practiced sympathy, I think we need to have a realistic conversation about your post-graduation plans. Alex had been looking forward to this meeting for months. His grades were excellent, straight A's in every subject except Dr. Whitfield's advanced mathematics, where he'd received a C+ despite consistently scoring the highest on every exam. I'd like to apply to MIT, Alex had said. Their computer science program is exactly what I'm looking for. Mrs. Patterson had smiled the same pitying smile that Dr. Whitfield had perfected. MIT is certainly an ambitious goal, but Alex, you need to understand that students from Westfield Academy don't typically pursue technical degrees. Technical degrees. Computer science, engineering, those sorts of fields. Our graduates tend toward more traditional paths. Harvard for law or business, Yale for economics, Princeton for political science. Careers that leverage the connections they've made here. Alex had felt the familiar sinking sensation in his stomach. But I want to study computer science. Of course you do. And there are excellent programs for that at state schools. University of Connecticut has a perfectly respectable computer science department. Very practical, very oriented toward immediate employment after graduation. Mrs. Patterson had pulled out a different folder. I've taken the liberty of researching some options that might be more suitable. There are several technical colleges in Connecticut that offer 2-year programs in computer programming. Very hands-on, very job-focused. Given your family's financial situation, it might be wise to choose something that guarantees immediate income. Alex had stared at the pamphlets she spread across her desk. You don't think I can get into MIT? Alex, it's not about capability. It's about fit. MIT students come from a very particular background. They've had access to resources, opportunities, connections that scholarship students simply haven't had. The conversation had continued for another 20 minutes, but Alex had stopped listening after scholarship students. Every suggestion had been a step down, a compromise, a realistic adjustment of his expectations. That afternoon, Alex had called his parents from the payphone outside the administrative building. Mijo, what's wrong? His mother had asked immediately. Carmen Santos had developed a sixth sense for her son's moods over their years of struggle. Mom, I want to leave Westfield. Leave? Alex, what happened? I don't belong here. Everyone keeps telling me that, and maybe they're right. Who is telling you this? Alex had explained about Dr. Whitfield, about Mrs. Patterson, about the constant message that his goals were unrealistic and his presence was tolerated rather than welcomed. "Alex," his father had said when Carmen handed him the phone, "your mother and I, we didn't sacrifice everything so you could quit." "Dad, I'm not quitting. Maybe I should finish high school somewhere else. Somewhere I can actually focus on learning instead of constantly defending my right to be there." There had been a long silence on the other end of the line. "If that's what you want, mijo," Carmen had finally said, "then we support you, but promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll show them they were wrong." Alex transferred to Bridgeport Central High School in the middle of his junior year, trading ivy-covered walls and manicured lawns for concrete hallways and chain-link fences. The adjustment should have been difficult, but instead, Alex felt like he could breathe for the first time in months. At Bridgeport Central, being smart wasn't a liability. Teachers encouraged his questions instead of dismissing them. Classmates asked for help with homework instead of treating him like an outsider. For the first time since starting at Westfield, Alex felt like he belonged somewhere, but the real change happened after school. "Alex," said Mr. Rodriguez, the computer science teacher, "I've been watching your work in programming class. You're picking this up faster than students who've been coding for years." Alex had discovered programming almost by accident. Bridgeport Central required all students to take a semester of practical technology, and computer science had been the only option that fit his schedule. Within 2 weeks, Alex was writing programs that impressed his teacher. Within a month, he was helping other students debug their code. "Have you ever thought about entering programming competitions?" Mr. Rodriguez asked. Alex hadn't even known such things existed. "There's a statewide high school programming contest in the spring," Mr. Rodriguez continued. "The winning team gets scholarships to any state university, plus internship opportunities with some major tech companies." For the first time since leaving Westfield, Alex felt genuine excitement about his future. He threw himself into programming with the same intensity he'd once applied to mathematics. Every spare moment was spent writing code, solving algorithmic problems, and learning new programming languages. While his former Westfield classmates were attending charity galas and summer internships at their parents' companies, Alex was building his first website, then his first mobile app, then his first small business. The business had started as a solution to a problem. Alex noticed that many of his neighbors, hard-working immigrants like his parents, struggled with technology. They needed help setting up email accounts, understanding their smartphones, filing taxes online. Traditional computer repair shops were expensive and often condescending. Alex started Santos Tech Solutions out of his family's apartment, charging minimal fees to help people navigate the digital world. Word spread quickly through their community. Soon Alex was earning more money than he'd ever imagined possible, enough to contribute meaningfully to his family's finances for the first time in his life. But the real breakthrough came during his senior year. Alex had been working on a mobile app designed to help non-English speakers navigate government websites. The app used simple visual interfaces and audio guidance to make complex bureaucratic processes accessible to people with limited English skills. "Alex," Mr. Rodriguez said one morning, barely containing his excitement, "you need to see this." He handed Alex a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local Teens App Wins National Competition." Alex's immigration assistance app had won first place in a national high school programming competition, beating teams from elite prep schools and specialized STEM academies. The prize included a full scholarship to any participating university, including MIT. "There's more," Mr. Rodriguez continued. 3 different companies have contacted the school wanting to meet with you. They're interested in licensing your app. One of those companies was a startup called Mobile Bridge, founded by 2 MIT graduates who specialized in making technology accessible to underserved communities. They didn't just want to license Alex's app. They wanted to hire him as a consultant while he attended college. Alex stared at the newspaper clipping, remembering Dr. Whitfield's words. People like you should consider trade school where your particular skills would be more appreciated. His particular skills had just earned him admission to MIT and a job offer before he'd even graduated high school. That night, Alex called his parents into the kitchen and spread out the scholarship documents, the newspaper clippings, and the job offer letters. "Mijo," Carmen said, tears streaming down her face. "We always knew you were special." No, Mom," Alex replied. "I'm not special. I'm just someone who refused to accept other people's limitations." MIT was everything Alex had dreamed it would be, and nothing like what Dr. Whitfield had predicted. Instead of feeling out of place among the children of privilege, Alex found himself surrounded by fellow obsessives, students who cared more about elegant code than expensive clothes, who measured success in problems solved rather than connections made. His immigration assistance app, now called Bridge App, had been acquired by Mobile Bridge for $50,000 plus equity in the company. Alex used the money to cover his living expenses while attending MIT, but more importantly, the success had given him confidence that his ideas had real value. "Santos," Professor Chen said after Alex's presentation on machine learning applications in language translation, "have you given any thought to graduate school?" Alex was only a sophomore, but he was already taking graduate-level courses and publishing research papers. His professors weren't just impressed by his technical skills, they were amazed by his ability to identify real-world problems and create technological solutions. "Actually," Alex replied, "I've been thinking about starting a company." The company began in Alex's dorm room, with $5,000 in seed money and an idea that seemed impossibly ambitious. Create software that could break down language barriers in real time, allowing people to communicate naturally regardless of their native language. Alex's first hire was his roommate, David Kim, a computer engineering major whose parents had immigrated from South Korea. Their second hire was Maria Gonzalez, a linguistics graduate student whose research on dialect recognition was years ahead of anything in the commercial market. "We're calling it Santos Tech," Alex announced to the MIT Entrepreneurship Club during his junior year. "Our mission is to make technology that connects people instead of dividing them." The presentation that night changed everything. In the audience was Jennifer Walsh, a venture capitalist who specialized in early-stage technology companies. After Alex's presentation, she approached him with an offer that seemed too good to be true. $2 million in Series A funding in exchange for 20% equity in Santos Tech. "I've been watching the translation software market for 5 years," Walsh explained over coffee the next day. "Everyone's focused on text translation or formal speech recognition. No one's cracking the problem of real-time conversational translation with dialect and cultural context recognition. Your approach could revolutionize international communication." Alex accepted the funding, but insisted on maintaining majority control of the company. He'd learned from Dr. Whitfield's dismissal that other people's definitions of realistic and appropriate weren't necessarily accurate. Santos Tech's first commercial product launched during Alex's senior year at MIT. Real Talk was a mobile app that provided real-time translation for face-to-face conversations, complete with cultural context clues and nonverbal communication suggestions. Within 6 months, Real Talk had been downloaded by over 1 million users worldwide. By the time Alex graduated from MIT, Santos Tech had raised $25 million in Series B funding and employed 47 people. The company's valuation had reached $100 million, making Alex a paper millionaire before his 22nd birthday. But Alex wasn't satisfied with just one successful product. Over the next 8 years, Santos Tech became a technology powerhouse, launching products that consistently anticipated market needs by years rather than months. Their AI-powered customer service platform revolutionized how companies interacted with multilingual customer bases. Their educational software made advanced STEM concepts accessible to students, regardless of their economic background. Their small business management tools helped immigrant entrepreneurs navigate complex regulatory requirements. Every product shared the same underlying philosophy. Technology should empower people, not exclude them. By 2024, Santos Tech employed over 800 people across 3 countries. The company had been valued at $2.8 billion in its most recent funding round, making Alex Santos one of the youngest self-made billionaires in American history. Forbes had featured him on their cover with the headline, "The Scholarship Kid Who Built an Empire." Harvard Business School used Santos Tech as a case study in values-driven entrepreneurship. MIT had offered Alex an endowed professorship in their computer science department. But for all his success, Alex had never forgotten the words that had driven him away from Westfield Academy 12 years earlier. Dr. Margaret Whitfield's dismissal had become the fuel that powered every late night, every impossible deadline, every moment when he'd pushed through doubt and exhaustion. And now, as Alex reviewed resumes for Santos Tech's new executive positions, he saw a familiar name that made his heart race with anticipation. Dr. Margaret Whitfield was applying for a job at his company. Dr. Margaret Whitfield's life had begun unraveling 3 years earlier, though she hadn't recognized the warning signs at the time. The first crack had appeared when Westfield Academy announced budget cuts that would eliminate several faculty positions. Margaret had felt secure. She'd been teaching there for 18 years. Her family's donations were substantial, and her husband Richard's investment banking salary provided financial stability. But Westfield's board of trustees had been clear. The school needed to modernize its curriculum to prepare students for a technology-driven economy. Mathematics teachers who couldn't adapt to computational thinking and programming applications would be replaced by younger faculty with more relevant skills. Margaret had tried to adapt. She'd taken summer courses in educational technology, learned to use programming languages in her calculus classes, and even developed a modest social media presence to connect with students. But at 57, she was competing with PhD graduates in their 20s who had grown up with the technology she was struggling to understand. When Westfield announced her position was being eliminated, Margaret had been confident she'd find another teaching job quickly. Her resume was impressive. Wellesley College undergraduate degree, Columbia PhD in mathematics, 18 years at one of the country's most prestigious prep schools. But the job market had changed dramatically since Margaret's last job search in 2006. Schools wanted teachers who could integrate technology seamlessly into their curriculum. Universities wanted professors who could bring in research grants. Even community colleges preferred candidates with experience in online learning platforms and adaptive educational software. After 6 months of interviews that led nowhere, Margaret's confidence began to crack. After a year of rejections, her savings account was nearly empty. After 18 months, she was borrowing money from her parents to make mortgage payments. The final blow had come when Richard lost his job at the investment firm. The financial industry was consolidating, eliminating older employees who commanded high salaries but lacked expertise in algorithmic trading and cryptocurrency markets. At 59, Richard was facing the same reality as his wife. Their skills were no longer as valuable as they'd believed. "Maybe we should consider relocating," Richard had suggested during one of their increasingly frequent arguments about money. Teaching positions might be more available in smaller markets. But Margaret couldn't imagine leaving Connecticut. Her entire identity was tied to her position in the state's educational and social hierarchy. She was Dr. Margaret Whitfield, daughter of a federal judge, graduate of elite institutions, member of the country club, and 3 different charity boards. Except she wasn't anymore. She was an unemployed teacher whose unemployment benefits had expired and whose marriage was fracturing under financial stress. The Santos Tech job posting had appeared during Margaret's desperate late-night browsing of employment websites. The company was hiring an educational outreach coordinator to develop partnerships with schools and universities. The position required experience in mathematics education and curriculum development, exactly Margaret's background. Margaret had researched Santos Tech obsessively before applying. The company's success story was impressive. Founded by a MIT graduate, focused on accessibility and education, valued at nearly $3 billion. Their educational software products were being used in schools across the country, and their commitment to closing the digital divide aligned with Margaret's evolving understanding of modern education. The irony hadn't occurred to her. Santos Tech had been founded by Alex Santos, but Margaret's world had contained dozens of students over the years, and she'd long since forgotten the details of one scholarship student who'd transferred out mid-semester. When Santos Tech's HR department called to schedule an interview, Margaret had felt hopeful for the first time in months. This job could save her career, her marriage, and her sense of self-worth. She'd prepared extensively, researching educational technology trends, practicing answers to interview questions, and even purchasing a new outfit with money borrowed from her sister. Margaret arrived at Santos Tech's headquarters in Stamford 30 minutes early, spending the extra time in her car, reviewing her notes and trying to calm her nerves. The building was impressive. A sleek glass structure with solar panels and a lobby filled with contemporary art. This was exactly the kind of innovative company she wanted to work for. The receptionist directed her to the executive conference room on the 15th floor. "Mr. Santos will be conducting the interview personally," she explained. "He likes to meet all potential team members." Margaret nodded, impressed that the company's founder took such a personal interest in hiring. It suggested the kind of values-driven leadership she could respect. She settled into the conference room and reviewed her materials one final time. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Long Island Sound stretched toward the horizon, and Margaret allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like to belong somewhere again. The door opened, and Margaret looked up with her most professional smile ready. The man who entered the room was young, maybe 30 years old, with dark hair and an expensive suit that fit perfectly. He was confident in the way that only came from significant success, but there was something about his expression that made Margaret's stomach clench with unease. "Dr. Whitfield," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Alex Santos. Thank you for coming in today." The name hit her like a physical blow. Margaret's hand trembled as she shook his, her mind racing to place the familiar features in the context of her past. Alex Santos, the scholarship student. The boy she'd told didn't belong at Westfield Academy. "Mr. Santos," she managed, her voice barely steady. It's good to meet you." Alex's smile was polite but cold. "Oh, we've met before, Doctor," Whitfield, though I suspect you don't remember. Margaret's heart pounded as memories crashed back. The quiet boy in the back row of her advanced mathematics class. The hand raised tentatively to answer questions his classmates couldn't solve, her own words echoing in her mind. This school isn't for people like you. Margaret started, then stopped, unsure how to continue. Westfield Academy, Alex said helpfully. Advanced mathematics. You told me I should consider trade school because people like me would be more comfortable in practical fields. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Margaret stared at the young man across from her, trying to reconcile the confident billionaire with the insecure teenager she remembered dismissing. Alex, she said finally, I remember now. I'm sorry if I said anything that discouraged you. You've obviously done very well for yourself. Alex leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Have I? Let's see. Massachusetts Institute of Technology Computer Science degree, summa cum laude, founded Santos Tech at 22. $3 billion valuation, 800 employees across 3 countries. I suppose that could be considered doing well? He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Of course, according to you, people like me weren't supposed to achieve that kind of success. We were supposed to be realistic about our prospects and choose something more appropriate to our station in life. Margaret felt tears forming in her eyes. Alex, I was wrong. What I said to you was inexcusable. I was young and privileged, and I didn't understand. You were 45, Alex interrupted. And you had 18 years of teaching experience. You weren't young, Dr. Whitfield. You were established, confident, and convinced that you could determine a 16-year-old's potential based on his family's income. Alex opened the folder containing Margaret's resume and job application. Now let's talk about your qualifications for this position, he continued, his voice taking on the same tone Margaret had once used with struggling students. Educational Outreach Coordinator. You'd be responsible for building relationships with schools and universities, helping them integrate our technology into their curricula. He looked up from the papers. The irony, of course, is that this position was created specifically to help students like I was, kids from underserved communities who need advocates in the educational system, kids who need someone to believe in their potential instead of limiting it. Margaret wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. I understand if you don't want to hire me, but I want you to know that I've learned from my mistakes. I've spent the last 2 years unemployed, struggling financially, facing the same kinds of barriers I used to dismiss in others. Have you? Alex asked. Because your resume suggests otherwise. 18 years at an elite prep school, advanced degrees from prestigious universities, a comfortable life funded by family wealth, and your husband's high-paying career. He closed the folder. Dr. Whitfield, let me ask you the same question you asked me 12 years ago. Do you really think you belong here? This company isn't for people like you. The words were delivered with quiet precision, each one a perfect echo of Margaret's own dismissal years earlier. People like me, Margaret whispered. People who think education is about maintaining social hierarchies instead of unleashing human potential. People who see privilege as a qualification and struggle as a disqualification. People who would probably be more comfortable in a different kind of professional environment. Alex stood up, signaling that the interview was over. Dr. Whitfield, I've reviewed your application carefully, and I'm afraid your background doesn't align with what Santos Tech represents. Perhaps you should consider opportunities in more traditional educational settings, where your particular approach to student development would be more appreciated. Margaret gathered her materials with shaking hands. Alex, please. I need this job. My husband and we're facing foreclosure. I know I was wrong 12 years ago, but I've changed. I can be better. Alex walked to the door and held it open. Dr. Whitfield, I do hope you find success, just somewhere more appropriate to your station in life. As Margaret walked through the Santos Tech lobby for the last time, she passed a wall display showcasing the company's mission statement. Technology that empowers everyone to reach their full potential, regardless of background or circumstance. Below it was a photo of Alex Santos at his MIT graduation, surrounded by his parents. Carmen Santos was wearing her factory uniform, having come directly from her shift to watch her son receive his degree. Miguel Santos had his arm around his wife, both parents beaming with pride at their son's achievement. The caption read, "Success belongs to those who refuse to accept other people's limitations." 6 months after Margaret Whitfield's interview at Santos Tech, Alex Santos received an unexpected email. "Mr. Santos," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know what's happened since our meeting." Margaret went on to explain that losing the Santos Tech opportunity had forced her to completely reevaluate her approach to education and her own assumptions about student potential. She'd taken a teaching position at a community college in Bridgeport, the same city where Alex had grown up. Her students were primarily working adults, immigrants, and people returning to education after years in the workforce. Many reminded her of the 16-year-old Alex Santos she'd failed to see clearly. "I think about you every day," Margaret wrote, "not because of the success you've achieved, but because of the potential I almost crushed. I've learned to look for that potential in every student, regardless of their background or circumstances." She described students like Maria, a single mother studying nursing while working 2 jobs. Like Carlos, a construction worker learning computer programming to support his family. Like Ahmed, a refugee who was retaking high school mathematics before applying to engineering programs. "They remind me that intelligence and determination aren't distributed according to wealth or social status," Margaret continued. "They remind me of the lesson you tried to teach me 12 years ago, when you raised your hand in my classroom, and I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." Alex read the email twice before responding. "Dr. Whitfield," he wrote back, "thank you for sharing your journey. The students you're working with now are lucky to have someone who understands both the barriers they face and the potential they possess." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I've been thinking about expanding Santos Tech's community college partnerships. If you're interested, I'd like to discuss how we might work together to provide technology and resources to underserved students. People like us." 3 weeks later, Dr. Margaret Whitfield stood in front of her computer programming class at Bridgeport Community College, demonstrating software that had been donated by Santos Tech. The program would allow her students to access the same learning resources used at MIT and Stanford, regardless of their ability to pay tuition at elite institutions. In the back row sat a 16-year-old named David Rodriguez, a high school student taking college classes through a dual enrollment program. David was brilliant but quiet, intimidated by classmates who seemed more confident and experienced. When Margaret called on him to answer a challenging question about algorithm design, David's solution was elegant and sophisticated, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of computational thinking that impressed everyone in the room. "Excellent work, David," Margaret said, her voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. That's exactly the kind of innovative thinking that technology companies are looking for. Have you considered applying for summer internships at tech companies? David looked surprised. I didn't think companies like that would be interested in someone like me. Margaret smiled, remembering another student who'd once felt the same way. David, she said, success belongs to those who refuse to accept other people's limitations. Let's talk after class about opportunities that might interest you. As Margaret watched David's face light up with possibility, she understood that redemption wasn't about being forgiven for past mistakes. It was about ensuring those mistakes were never repeated. Outside the classroom window, a small plaque was visible on the newly constructed computer lab. It read, "The Santos Family Technology Center, where every student belongs." Alex had kept his promise. Technology that empowered everyone, regardless of background or circumstance. And Dr. Margaret Whitfield had finally learned to see potential instead of limitations, possibility instead of prejudice. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the students we underestimate. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get a second chance to get it right. This has been another Untold Legends story. Remember, never underestimate someone based on their background. The quiet kid in the back row might just be building the future. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Untold Legends for more tales of people who refused to accept the limitations others placed on them.